Dr. Stan Ward, welcome to the Star Coach Show.
Hi, Meg, and you can call me Stan. We've known each other far too long for the formalities.
We were only going to be formal at the very beginning. We're diving into some rubbing elbows and some good stuff
Okay,
moving forward.
good
So,
deal.
ladies and gentlemen, we've got a great show for you today. We are going to be talking about something that I know from my work with coaches over the past 15, 16 years, teaching and mentoring over 2,000 coaches, that not all of us think about. And I'm delighted to have Stan talk to us about, which is a foundational aspect of our business. How are we managing our money? How are we setting up accounts? What are we doing in that foundational aspect to be successful, even in the face of feast and famine, which does happen sometimes? So, how are we keeping steady? We're going to be talking about that in just a moment, and I'm going to let you know why I wanted to talk to Stan about that. But let's start with just thanking you. Thanking you for being here. Thanking you for being a listener. Each and every week, we bring a new Star Coach episode to you where we focus on strategies, tools, and resources for your development as a coach, building your business, changing organizations through coaching. That's just super, uber, uber important. And that's how come we do this. I ask you to please take a moment and subscribe wherever you're listening. So follow me in Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Audible, wherever you're hearing this, or please subscribe to the YouTube channel at Star Coach Show, because you will get alerted for all the extra jewels that I put into the YouTube channel, the shorts, the tips, the strategies. You gotta subscribe. And this is the great thing about subscription. They let you know when I add something new. Star Coach just put something else up, and then you can determine whether you want to hop in there and consume it, because I promise you it has been created to help you be the best you can be. So, with that being said, let's dive into this episode with my friend and somebody that I so respect, Stan Ward. Stan is all about leadership. He's about coaching. He's about helping people thrive wherever it is, whatever you're doing. As a matter of fact, he was on this show with me over 100 episodes ago, episode 293, where we talked about the power of self-care. Stan also came to the Star Coach member community to talk about that very thing, rubbed elbows with the members, helped them start their year with thinking about health and well-being from top to bottom and between our ears. And that is just so key. And I'm so grateful that they just loved you and loved having you there. So, in his business, influence coaching, Stan works with leaders to reduce unnecessary conflict, beat burnout, create sustainable positive change. I mean, like, who doesn't want that? Let's raise our, like, hello, who wants that? And this is really like behind the scenes stuff. Stan is a phenomenal entertainer. He has been a part of the Texas Coaches Coalition retreat for many years. This year was the first year in a while where he was like a participant rather than somebody doing everything. And yet he continues to bring his personality, his charm, his musical ability in front of all of us. He plays his ukulele, he plays his guitar. We sing, we dance, we have a phenomenal time, all because of Stan Ward. So, with that, Stan, today we're going to dive into foundational aspects of our business. We've both had to grow our businesses. We've had to, we hit hiccups, we hit barriers, and yet there's some systems that we can put in place that might just help us lean more towards success and sustainability versus cratering. And we both know way too many coaches are not successful in creating sustainable businesses. So today's conversation hopefully will help them flip that, right?
Yes. Yep. I'm all
Excellent.
about sustainability, whether it's a person's leadership style. I want to help people lead well without exhausting themselves. And then the same way with coaches and their businesses. And that's partly what I love about the TCC experience. I call it Coach Camp. because it is a chance to get that boost that we all need so we can push through another year and show up as coaches the way we need to.
Exactly. It's like connection. I was just in the Star Coach community right before we hopped onto this. It was such a rich discussion. And really, it was key about it's hard to do everything alone. It is so hard to be isolated. So, whether it was the coaches talking about, do I really have what it takes to be a good coach? Or what am I going to do in the face of all this disruption? I'm scared. I mean, we just kept coming back to the fact that being together as a community and being able to answer those questions, not be in isolation, so much of that is self-care. And I agree with you. The TCC conference, which by the way is every March, ladies and gentlemen, look it up at TCC, well, Coaches Coalition. Just Google Coaches Coalition and
Yeah,
you'll find it.
TexasCoachesCoalition.org, I believe.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, with that, we're going to talk about how important knowing our numbers and creating places to keep our finances. And what we need to think about regarding that is really how we know our business and how we help our business thrive. With that, I know you've presented on this, you've had coaches be like, that's exciting. Thank you. Where are we going to start with this today?
Yeah, so let's start with a story, right?
Ooh,
Um, and this we'll give a shout out to you as well in this story. So I left. I actually founded my coaching practice in 2014, got my LLC set up. Most of that between 2014 to 2020 was part-time work, right? It's just a kind of a side hustle. And then in 2020, I left my full-time paying gig that sent me paychecks and had
always a
benefits.
big gulp. Oh,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Honestly, it was terrifying. Because my background's in education. And so I saw myself as an educator and a person who liked helping people, not as a business person. And and man, that story was just running through my head. And so, partly by listening to your podcast episodes up to that time, gosh, I think you may have been around episode 200 or so. Man, I was gathering everything I could to learn about running a coaching business. I listened to all those episodes. Um, and over the next 5 years, began to put things in play so that I could finally just have some peace. And, the thing I will tell you is it's nice because that story about I know how to be a good coach, but I don't know how to run a business, that story is quiet. I don't hear that running around in my head anymore. And
oh.
who knows? Maybe just changing my beliefs has made this more peaceful, but I'd like to think it's these systems that are helping as well.
Absolutely. But I think both of those need to be acknowledged, right? When we tell ourselves, I'm no good at this, we're looking for all the evidence to support that we're no good at this. I have my oldest son is brilliant and one of the most kind, gentle, funny, and he's told himself his whole life, I suck at math. I'm terrible at math. And so what happened? It was a struggle throughout school, throughout, luckily he's really successful now and but I felt he just had this running, I stink at math. I stink at math. So it just was a struggle throughout. And I hear from coaches, I stink at running a business. I stink at marketing. I stink at creating relationships. It's like, really? That's really what you do as a coach. So how can we reframe this? And what are the resources that are available to you? What do you need to put in place? Let's talk about what we can put into place.
Yeah, so there are some key systems that a coach is going to want to get in place in order to be sustainable. And when we were, of course, setting up for this call, one of the things I had mentioned is, ironically, this season for me has been a little slower as far as income. There's a time I had about $30,000 in invoices I was waiting to get paid on, and I was looking at that number, just going, "Wow." What I can tell you though is because of the systems that we're going to talk about, I'm okay. You know, it's working. Um, so coaches, I want to encourage you to think about the income for your business. Think about like a grain elevator, right? So money's coming into the top of the elevator, and then slowly as it's needed, right, we draw the grain out. and that you're going to have some buckets that you're going to use to for that grain. All right. Um, this is interesting because I'm just starting to play with the metaphor, so we'll see where this goes.
I love
Maybe
that. I love that.
slopping the
We're
hogs
being
before it's all
creative
done.
together. Yeah, we're slapping the hogs. Love
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Um, so the idea is that you want to set up a couple different banking accounts. You want to create a wall of separation between your personal accounts and your business accounts. And in particular, coaches, I want you to get two buckets or two accounts set up. One would be what we'll call your operating expenses, your operations account. You're going to use that account to pay yourself. And by the way, it is important to pay yourself. We'll talk a little more about what that can look like later. You're also going to use that to pay your operating expenses. Any money that comes into your grain elevator, right, that's coming into your business is going to go into that operating bucket. The other account that you're going to want to set up will be your tax account. Taxes are important. You're going to have to pay them, and it's
You
it's it's
can't pretend
helpful.
they're not there. Yes.
Yeah, they're going to show up one way or the other. And I've had to learn the hard way that you need to pay them quarterly because if you don't, you get to pay extra. You have this opportunity to pay even more.
Isn't that lovely?
It
Yes.
is, it is.
Well, and it's a bigger hickey when you play it all at once with the penalties on top of it than if you chunk it down and you're actually paying it as the expectation is.
Yes. And so that's why you're going to want to set aside another account where your tax money is going to go. And then every quarter, you're just going to empty that and send it to the government.
Mhm.
And
How do
then
you
that way you
determine
stay
what you
ahead.
put into that tax account?
Yes. So without getting into, I'm also more on the humanities side of things. So without trying to do a whole lot of heavy number crunching, what I have done, and I got this from a book called Profit First. I believe Mike Miklowicz is the author of that. In there, he gives some percentages. If your business is about 150,000 or less, he suggests you draw about 50%. I'm going to say a little more is what you're going to be able to pay yourself. That you want to set aside 20 to 30% then for operations. You're going to want to set aside about 15% for taxes, and that should leave 5% then for you to send to yourself in the form of an emergency fund or maybe to invest for your retirement. So, really, what I've been doing is essentially saying, okay, here's the money that came in for the month. 15% of that then goes out of the grain silo and into the tax bucket.
Mhm.
Um, Part of what has helped me with that, though, this last year is I did start working more frequently with my accountant, and that has been helpful. In fact, I found out this last month I had already set aside more than enough money to cover the taxes that she was estimating I was going to owe, and so I got to have a month that was, tax free essentially. So that was kind of fun.
That is fun. And you bring up a good point there in that I get that we're all at different levels of what we can afford to bring in the way of expertise and help. Um, and often, getting a bookkeeper or an accountant to help us is not as big of an expense as we think. And just getting that perspective can be amazingly helpful in your confidence, in your, understanding. But even without, we're talking about, these systems that you can create yourself. I'm just wanting to kind of yeah, I'm a bad one for it took me forever to hire a bookkeeper for my business. I was doing everything myself and I was like, that's not my genius work. That's not really where it would give me a rash, right? But I would do it anyway. And I realized it's not that big of an expense to bring somebody on who that is their expertise. But we still want to have these systems in place. So you got a month. So let's celebrate the fact that you got a tax-free
Yeah,
month.
jazz hands.
And yeah, woohoo! So what next? So we're thinking about these
Hmm.
accounts. We're putting money that is basically if you take it out of your grain elevator and put it to the side, you're you're knowing that you don't have that for other things and then you're not panicked when that quarterly bill comes due.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the idea is just think of that as that money belongs to somebody else. That is no longer my money. Sometimes there will be good news like that tax-free month. And I can tell you one of the things I've done too is sometimes if I overpay for taxes, any of that extra money, my personal, the way I handle it is I say, okay, well, I wasn't planning on having that. So that's just that money goes to retirement or my emergency fund.
Love
Um,
that. The
Out of
other thing
sight.
to just think about is that if you do end up overpaying, like at the end of the year, it
Hmm.
helps you with your first quarterly payment. So if you have overpaid for 2023, when your tax bill comes for 2024, you're very for on April 15th, that's your first quarterly payment. If you've overpaid, you have the option to turn that overpayment into your first quarterly payment, which can also be a bit of a like, even if it's
Ah,
just part of it, it's like,
yeah.
well, that's not quite as big as I thought it was going to be.
Yes. Yep. The other thing that's been helpful too with these systems is now that I kind of have a general sense of where my business tends to run. Remember we talked about that paycheck to yourself that somewhere between, and I'm going to recommend between 50 to 60%. You'll have to dial it in for yourself depending on your operating expenses and some things. Um, but now that I've got a better sense of what that number could be for the year, I now just pay myself twice a month and I'm able to automate it. So on the 31st of the month, money goes from my business account into my personal account. I get my paycheck from myself. I do it on the 31st because I have bills that are due on the 1st. And so that way I know there's money to pay the bills. And then we do it again on the 15th. And you may say, well, Stan, why not just pay yourself one lump sum a month? Well, this goes back to the grain elevator thing, right? Because sometimes that elevator has more grain than others. And
Mm-hmm.
I have found that by spreading it out, even just that little 2 week gap, that helps me collect invoices and just make sure that even if it's just a slow drip of money, that helps me not worry about getting too low in my operating account.
Love it. All right. So we've got an individual account that is separated from our business account. And then we've got two business accounts. We've got
Hmm.
operating expenses and we've got a tax account. What
Hmm.
else should we be thinking about when we're, and you also talked about in a retirement or emergency fund. So is that a separate account?
Thank you for asking. Good clarification. So, what I recommend on that is certainly start with an emergency account if you don't already have that. Um, I've heard at least $1,000. That way, if you have a utility break or something, you can replace that. Um, I find a high interest savings account. And so my local bank's great because I don't have to pay extra for my business account. It's a checking account. I have a debit card with it. And there's no penalties if that account gets low. So it's wonderful. The flip side of that is they don't pay a lot of interest. And so I've gone online and I have found a bank that does pay the best interest rates I could find. And that's where my emergency account goes. And so once again, it's an automated payment at this point that money goes from my operating account directly into my emergency fund account. That's kind of part of the way I'm paying myself. And then the other side of it is I also automate a withdraw. It's a self-employed pension, SEP, IRA. That's coming out of my business, and it's going to. I use Vanguard low fee mutual funds. That money goes to Vanguard. And again, it's automated. I don't have to think about it too much. If the numbers start getting off and the business starts really struggling, yeah, there are times I stop the automation and I really control it. But those activities, those systems are running every month. And again, thanks be. I can just tell you, it has been such a gift because I can see progress on all those things that are important to us. Making sure we're able to pay our expenses and knowing what expenses we can afford and what we can't. Knowing what I
Right.
need to charge for my services, which that may even be something we get into as well. Um, Knowing what I can afford to pay myself and making sure that there's also money being set aside for a rainy day.
Love it. And the other thing that I want people to know, if this is something that's new to you or you're just becoming a business owner, that SEP that Stan's talking about, the self-employment pension or savings account for your retirement, that actually is tax deductible. So depending upon the amount of money you make, every year I say to my accountant, okay, I put in this much to my SAP based upon what I've made this year. What additional window do I have to see if I can, because the more I put into my SAP, the less taxes I pay. Now, it's not like dollar for dollar. It's not like,
Hmm.
oh, you put in another 2000 and you take that off your tax bill. No, that's it. But it's just something to be aware of. And when you do it monthly, you at least are accumulating every month so that at the end of the year, it's not like, once again, well, where am I going to get 15,000 to put into my SAP? Well, have I put in money throughout the year? Just want people to know that that helps you with your tax bill
Yes,
and it helps you with your retirement. Hello.
yes. As my father-in-law has said, inch by inch, life is a cinch. Yard by yard, life is hard. Right. So those monthly payments, even though they feel small, they may look small. Thanks to our friend compounding interest, it literally, in fact, adds up.
It really does. And it's kind of fun to, well, depending upon what's happening with the stock market, but we won't go there.
Yeah, yeah,
So, with that, you did mention that this also informs your pricing, which is so interesting. I just did like, it hasn't gone live yet, but it might by the time this one goes live, but a show on pricing. Now, I also did a solo episode that has gone live on pricing. And I think that pricing is one of those things that sometimes we forget to reevaluate. We forget, like, prices go up and inflation, things, right? And then we're like, oh, I'm charging the same thing I charged in 2010 or whatever. I mean, I don't know that, but what are we doing to kind of inform our pricing? What's your advice about that?
yeah. To whatever extent you can separate your sense of self and self-worth, whether that's a high sense of self-worth or a low one, from what you're charging, you're doing yourself a favor and you're doing deep work, right? I mean, that's a big
Yes.
thing. Two, so my system, especially now that I've got my buckets all lined out and I kind of have a sense of what money's flowing where and what I need to get. So at the beginning of the year, I basically sit down and I say, okay, how many hours do I want to work a week on average? Got a number. Great. And when I say work, face-to-face time with clients.
Okay. Not the
Okay.
marketing and the business building and
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
how much client interaction do I want to have? Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And I'll just tell you realistically right now, what I calculated for this year is basically I've got about 3 hours a day, 4 days a week that I can spend with
Okay.
clients one-on-one, because the rest of it is going to be the networking, the marketing, the studying, the all the things that we have to do behind the scenes.
Well, thank you for sharing, because I think it's really helpful when we have real examples to use as listeners to begin to apply. So for you, it's
Yeah.
about 3 hours a week, 4 days a week, 12 hours.
Yeah, about 12 hours a week. And I'll tell you that part of that came too when I first was going into business for myself. I mean, I was seeing clients all day long because thankfully I had a gig with a large organization, but then I didn't have time to line up any other work. And so when that came
Mhm.
to an, when that contract started to come to an end, man, you talk about anxiety, right?
Right.
So we've got to build these other spaces in. Um, and boy, I just got so caught up in telling that little story that I forgot what were we talking about again?
So we're basically talking about what informs pricing.
Oh, thank
And so
you.
you
Yes.
start with how many, what's reasonable for your
Yeah.
weekly face to face.
Yeah. So with that, let's say it's 12. So I'm calculating 12 hours a week. So I'm going to multiply that by four because there's approximately 4 weeks in a month, 48.
Mhm.
And then I'm actually not going to assume that I'm working 12 months out of the year.
Good assumption.
Yep. Yep. So what I'm going to call a conservative assumption is to say I'm able to work 10 months out of the year.
Okay.
And some of that is just to be honest, family, I've got family to see. Sometimes I get sick, right? I mean, there's just
Yeah,
stuff happens.
well, you're the self-care guy too, right? So we know that we've got to input our well if we're going to keep, you can't draw water from a dry well
Yes. Yep. Yep. And I need four
or
days for
grain from
TCC.
an empty grain elevator.
Yes.
Yes.
Um, So that gives me about 480 hours that I'm able to work with. And then I say, okay, what do I need my business to make so that I can pay myself what I want to pay myself?
Mhm.
And then once I have that large number, I divide it by 480, and I just call that my working number.
Okay.
Now, to be clear, I'm not one of those guys who charges hourly. This is a
Thank
behind the
you.
scenes thing I do when I'm sending a proposal, trying to figure out how much a group project may cost, team coaching may cost this, one-on-one with this client may cost this, and of course we're going to add assessments, things of that nature. I used to basically just charge cost for assessments. I don't recommend doing that.
I
Um,
don't either.
yeah, now what I'm working with is I just triple what it costs me.
Because there's a lot of there's the debrief and there's the analysis and there's a lot that goes into providing an assessment, let alone the results that it gives to the client, the insight, the awareness, the value that it brings.
Yeah. And so what I've found is I now have this kind of hourly number of hour of contact time with my client.
Hmm.
And so I use that then in all my calculations to figure out what I'm going to charge, whether it's for a coaching program. I sell a program, not hours. But I
Right.
use that to calculate the cost of a program. I use that to calculate the cost. When people ask, Stan, you want to speak for us? Okay, great. So I kind of have a multiplier for that. When I'm speaking to a large group, I say, okay, I take my hourly rate and I multiply by 4. Where did I get that number? I don't know. It's just working for me right now. So you
Right.
find the numbers that work for you. The point is, you've got a formula so you don't have to get all spun up and all this self-worth stuff and all
What am
this, oh, I
I
like these
worth?
people and who are they going to think
Yeah.
I am? And blah.
It also keeps you from thinking, even thinking in that dollars for hours, kind of like, am I a $50 an hour coach? Am I a $250? Am I, it doesn't, it's like, what are your expense? What is the lifestyle that you have? What is and yes, hopefully we are starting with the premise that you are good at what you do, because
Mm.
the reality is, to sell a service, we have to be responsible about how am I showing up and learning and growing and being the best I can be. So that, yes, we start there.
And
But
thank you for
with
making
that,
that point. I
yeah.
think it's so easy to get hijacked on how much I should charge that we lose sight of the fact that that's not the first question. The first question is, how do I serve this person best?
Oh, love that. And it doesn't need to be just pull it from the air. I love that Stan gave us a formula to kind of look at, okay, what is, because it's a, ladies and gentlemen, it's okay for you to make some decisions about how many hours you want to work, what kind of services you want to provide, what lifestyle you want to live, what are your expenses. It doesn't need to be like, oh, just uh what's going to fall in my lap. You get behind the driver's wheel. Get, yes, as a coach, your client is behind the driver's in the driver's seat. This is you driving your business. This is you driving and making decisions about your life. And when you use an informed formula like Stan's talking about, you can more confidently, because it's not like, hell if I know how I came up with that number. I mean, you can confidently say, this is this is my these are the expenses, or this is what my program costs, or this is, and it's well worth that investment. But you can be confident in just unapologetically offering your price.
Yeah, there's reason behind it.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I'd want to offer is too, at the start of this, you've got to decide, am I in business to be in, is this a lifestyle business or is this a money-making business? Because that's also going to inform some decisions as well as how
Yes.
may want to handle scaling and all that kind of stuff. So, for me, in a lot of ways, this is more lifestyle for me. That's why I start with the number of hours I want to work per year,
Hmm.
and then everything flows from there.
So with that, I love that you said that because we could also tweak this formula, right? So if you are in a place right now where you need to pay off some bills, you need to have a particular income, you need to there are some needs that might drive like, okay, I want to work more than 12. I might not even want, but maybe I need to work 20 hours a week because to get to the goals that I have. So you can tweak that. I love that Stan sort of looks at what do I want to do? What works for me at this stage in life, where I'm at, what I want to do. And it might be that at a different stage of life, you're like, okay, I'm putting in 20, 25 hours of face-to-face time with my clients. What does that look like? What do I need to do around self-care? What do I need to do around that's all but it depending upon what our driver, what our motivator is, that answer might be different. But the formula is still the formula.
Yes. And this also kind of goes to some of the self-care stuff, recognizing the amount of energy I have to put into what I'm doing. I've just recognized I probably have 4 coaching conversations in me a day. That'd be my hit. That's my limit. That's my wall.
Mhm.
And so that's why I plan on 3. And knowing, Mondays I actually keep clear. That's kind of my makeup day. So if someone wasn't able to make their appointment, I'm able to fit them in on a Monday. That gives me a lot of flexibility. Otherwise, it's just office and catch up and planning and all those things. But yeah, a lot of this for me is I do a lifestyle business partly because I'm recognizing the constraints I'm working with.
So good. And at different stages, so just the other morning, I think it was yesterday morning, I had like looked myself in the mirror and said, Meg, you're getting like your runway is getting shorter. You're
Mhm.
not, I mean, the I've been doing this a long time and I don't know how many more years I'm going to do, but there are things that I love doing. So it also becomes what giving myself permission to make choices about like what am I going to fill my calendar with over these next 4 to 6 years, um, and maybe beyond that. But basically, I and this isn't really where we're going, but I think it fits with you, and I
I
think we
love it.
can
Let's
roll
let's
with it.
let's go.
It's sort of like, okay, I've been doing this work long enough to know what really lights me up, what fills my tank, what might I give myself permission to pull back from? And what do I want to accelerate into even more? And what mindset shifts do I need to do that? And what actual actions do I need to take to make those shifts? And I think sometimes we need to give ourselves permission. I mean, it's taken me a stinking long time to like say, okay, now I'm into my early 60s. It's time to kind of make some choices about does everything that I have been doing the things that I want to do over the next 5 to 10 years? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, what this is going to sound so coachy, right? But shifting from survive to thrive, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I do think in our business life, in our business cycle, at first, yes, boy, you're just hustling and doing everything you can to get this thing off the ground and get it going and get that client base. Um, but I want to encourage coaches out there, you don't have to stay in a survival mentality. And having systems in place will help you get out of that survival mentality faster because you're going to be able to trust those systems to meet basic needs.
Love it. So, and then the thing is, wherever you're listening, whatever stage of life you're in, that's great. That's fine. And make the most out of each stage. I think sometimes though we also need to give ourselves permission to look at the big picture and say, is every piece of this pie really what I want in my life right now? Do I want to make some pieces bigger and some pieces smaller or take them out of the pie altogether? Um, but having systems makes even that decision easier.
Yes. And those decisions then can feed back into the system as you're fine tuning it.
Love it. So now let's talk about you've delivered talks on this. You've gotten what are coaches telling you that has impacted them when they hear about these systems and then they begin to implement them in their businesses?
Yeah, it's so funny. One of the first things that I hear from folks is they realize that they've got to decide, am I doing this as a hobby or am I doing it as a business?
Bingo.
Yeah. Um, and then with that, usually there's a sense of, okay, I need to professionalize this. I need to put this stuff in place. Some of the feedback I've gotten that's been really encouraging is this idea of once you kind of have a sense of what to set aside for your operating expenses, that is a real game changer for folks. And so, again, kind of depending on where you're at, I would recommend maybe 20 to 30%. It would be a ballpark to start with. And that's going to make some decisions on what you can afford, what you need to say no to. I want to remind our coach friends that business building is different from enrolling in your PCC training program. That's not business building because that's an expense. Now that's personal professional development. That's great,
Right.
but that's part of that operating pie, and you've got to decide if that's going to be able to fit in there or not. And if not, okay, what are some other options then that can help you get to the goal
Mhm.
that you want to get to? There's a lot of ways you can pursue this stuff.
And it does come down to choice and making logical choices for what works best for you. I just made a really difficult choice this year in having to decide because continuing education costs money. I mean, it's a major investment, and depending upon what you're doing, it can get more and more of an investment. So I was looking at I want my MCC and I want to do a training on being a coach supervisor. Both were major investments. It didn't make logical sense looking at my big picture, either in time or in resources, to do both at the exact same time. But I'd already sort of lined up both at the exact same time. So I had to make a decision. What direction do I go in? Where is my time, my energy, and my resources best spent to reach my goals for 2025? And I might have to kick the other one down the road. And I did. I had to kind of put it off. But it's hard sometimes. If I didn't look at the big picture, though, I might have invested in both things, been exhausted, not been my best for both, and really not had the time or that big hickey of expense for both of
Yes.
those things.
I think there's some FOMO that we get into.
Yes.
Um, I had a friend reach out to me because he knew I was a coach, and he said he was thinking about being a coach and getting coach training. I said, okay, well, why do you want to do that? What makes that important to you? He said, well, I just feel like it would open some opportunities for me. And I cautioned him and I said, hey, you're 50 years old. I don't know that you have time to just create opportunities. You're going to have a reason if you're going to pursue this because it is expensive in both time and money and effort, all
And you
these
got to
things.
build the muscle. It's not like you just go to coach training and suddenly you have a full business and you're a superb coach. You've got to build both those things up. It's and I remember when I went into coaching, and this was 17 years ago. My best friend and I were in a therapy practice together. It was actually her idea to originally pursue coaching, and I got interested in it and thought this is going to meet the need for all the things that I'm seeing in my practice. And she said to me after we did the research, and she said, I just don't know that I want to build it all again. I've built a
Hmm.
successful therapy practice. I just don't know that I have the bandwidth to do that. Totally okay, but such a good decision for her. And I was like, I'm 100% going to do this. And that's where I wanted to go. Has worked out well. I mean, she continues to be a successful therapist. She's an employee assistance program coordinator for a huge company. It worked great for her. She's able to work like 20 hours a week right now. I'm not in that place of working only 20 hours a week right now, but that's okay. Um, Point being, it is a life transition. Often, if it's taking on something like building a business, it is going to be an energy consumer of that. And that's okay if that's where your motivation and you've got to be grounded into your purpose, right?
Yes. And this again, we're kind of getting back into some self-care stuff, right? But I have the formula
Mm-hmm.
for burnout, right? So it's energy in minus energy out times time, right? Boosters minus drainers times time. And so if pursuing your coaching business is a booster, it leaves you with more energy than it costs you. Man, that's awesome. Lean into it, right? But if all these things are drainers, well, this may not be the path.
Right. So we just look at it, we assess. We can only make those decisions for ourselves, but so helpful. And such a bonus that we did a little of the let's touch back into the burnout thing as well. We did talk about that to more in more depth in Stan's first episode with me. So be sure we will put the link for that in the show notes. Stan, so good. What have we left on the table that we need to explore regarding know your numbers, know your business, thrive?
Yeah, I recently stumbled into my daily ABCs that I'd love to share,
Yes.
right? And again, I'm a systems geek, in case you can't tell. Just I love having processes. It just reduces the cognitive load and actually just helps me feel more successful. And so one thing that I've been doing lately is I kind of have my daily ABCs. And so A is author content. Every day I'm creating. I have a Substack that I write for, and so I'm working on that content. Maybe I'm working on a talk. Sometimes the authoring content is simply creating a new post for LinkedIn, but every day I'm creating some kind of content. B is build business. Business building is not the same as professional development. Business building for me is either A, it brings in money, or B, it brings in people. So, in a sense, this would be a kind of business building investment in that this is going to connect me with your listeners, right? That's connecting me to people.
Hmm.
C then is really care for my clients. And so that may be looking down the list and see if anyone's fallen off the schedule that I need to recontact. Sometimes it's, oh, I hear something's going on in their life. I can send them a note. Maybe even just be randomly checking in. Hey, how are things going? So provide that measure of client care. D is develop self. That's where we get into some of these coach training programs, reading, even exercise, some of that self-care stuff. That's my letter D. And then if I get in A, B, C, D, what I find is I actually discover E. I hit E, which is just enjoy. And so some days this is a list to double check myself to make sure I'm hitting on everything. Other times it's like a done win list. And so if earlier in the day it's 2, 3 o'clock and I've knocked out my ABCD, nothing is urgent, man, I'm done.
And you can move right into E and enjoy something.
That's right.
Love it. Love it. Stan Ward, thank you so much for coming back on the show, bringing your expertise. How can people connect with you?
Yeah, a couple things. One, I tend to be active on LinkedIn. We will also have some links here. If folks want to follow my writing on Substack. The thing I'm most excited about is I am launching a new program for coaches, a group program called the Profitable Coach, how to fast start to financial peace. And so the idea is I've taken these systems, I've packaged them into a 60-day process, a 60-day program that'll get you from zero to all these things set up that we've talked about. And so I'll also provide a link here for your coaches to find out more about that. And the other thing I'd encourage them to do is we'll have a link for them on a quiz they can take. I call it the Cash Flow Confidence Quiz, where they will be able to identify specifically the things they already have in place that are working, that's going to provide for this system we've talked about, as well as the specific items where there are gaps. And essentially what that's going to do is give you a punch list so you know exactly where you need to put your time and energy.
So good. So we will have links for that. If you're watching us on YouTube, those links are in the right below this video. If you're listening wherever the Star Coach Show plays, which is everywhere, just grab the show notes for this episode. And there will be a link in there also for Stan's other interview with me, because I know now that you've gotten him here, you're like, oh, I want more, and we've got more. So that's awesome. Stan Ward, thank you so much for bringing your expertise forward. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being a listener of the Star Coach Show. This show is a passion of mine. It is heart work. Back in 2016, when I started, I just thought I need to create a resource for the coaching community. Little did I know that this was going to be just such a passion project for me. And I get to meet and spend time with incredible people like Stan and get emails from you listeners who say that show was exactly what I needed to hear at that moment. Or like Stan said today, I consumed all of those episodes to help me build my business as a coach. That lights me up because I believe that we all have our skills and our talents, and we're put here on the earth together for a reason. And when we lean into our talents and what we can bring forward, it helps other people be the best they can be. Guys, we are all here together to support one another, to love one another, to be connected, not to degrade each other and and hate. I'm sorry. It's just I don't believe that that's why we're here together. So, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and keep doing your work because you can't be a secret and a success at the same time. Fill that grain silo so that your buckets are overflowing. And once again, major applause and thank you to Dr. Stan Ward for being with us today.
Always a pleasure. Good to see you, Meg.